Okay, so you want to buy a Falcon 9. Find the rocket, hire the engineers, watch it climbs. But here's the strange part. A Falcon 9 is one of the most complex machines humans have ever built. A 500-ton skyscraper that lands itself on a boat. And the company that makes them will barely sell you one. And even if they did, the rocket is the cheapest part of the whole equation. Anyway, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that's possible. How rockets actually make money on the inside. Why building the world's best rocket still isn't enough to make you rich. And why a Falcon 9 isn't really the business most people think it is. Rockets come in 3 sizes, and they're 3 completely different businesses. A small orbital rocket like Rocket Lab's Electron costs you around $7.5 million a launch. For that money, you get a slender little vehicle that lofts a fridge-sized satellite and nothing more. A medium-lift rocket, the Falcon 9 class, runs about $74 million per launch as of 2026, up from $70 million just months earlier. This thing hauls 22 tons to orbit, lands its booster, and flies again in weeks. And then there's the Heavy class, where the numbers get silly. A Falcon Heavy runs about $97 million reusable, and $150 million if you throw the whole thing away. Fully expended, it puts 64 tons into orbit, the weight of a loaded semi-truck. But the launch price is just the start. 2 more costs nobody warns you about. The first is the rocket you destroy every single time. Even on a reusable Falcon 9, the entire second stage is thrown away on every flight. Several million dollars of engine and tank that burns up over the ocean and is never seen again. And here's the part that already breaks people's brains. Throwing more of the rocket away can be the smart move. If SpaceX skips the landing and expends the booster too, the Falcon 9's payload jumps by around 30%. Sometimes the wasteful version is the profitable version. The rocket that lands is the one you see on TV. The rocket that doesn't is the one making the hard money. The second cost is regulation and geography. You can't launch from your backyard. You need a licensed pad, an FAA launch license, range safety, and a government willing to let you point a ballistic object at the sky. Miss a paperwork window, and your $74 million rocket sits on the ground, burning storage costs. Now we get to the question that actually matters. Where does the money come from? Every rocket launch is, underneath, a brutally simple equation. You are selling one thing: kilograms to orbit. That's it. The customer doesn't care about the rocket. They care that their satellite ends up 500 kilometers up, moving at 28,000 kilometers an hour in exactly the right spot. The industry has a name for the number that decides everything: cost per kilogram. And that number tells the single most important story in modern space, a story almost nobody noticed. On the space shuttle, it cost roughly $54,000 to put 1 kilogram into orbit. On a Falcon 9, the customer pays around $2,700. SpaceX's internal cost is closer to $600. In one generation, the price of reaching space fell more than 95%, and it happened so quietly, most people still think space is expensive. It isn't anymore. That collapse is the whole reason this industry exists. Easiest way to picture it: imagine you're a courier. Someone pays you $100 to deliver a package across town. If gas costs you $90, you keep $10. Boring. Now imagine you buy a truck so efficient your gas cost drops to $20. Same delivery, same $100 charge, but now you keep $80. You didn't raise your price, you lowered your cost. That gap is the entire game. That's what reusability did to rockets. By reusing the first-stage booster, SpaceX saves around $15 million per launch. The world thinks a Falcon 9 launch costs about $70 million because that's the sticker price, but the actual cost to SpaceX is around $15 million or less. The customer pays the sticker, SpaceX keeps the gap. Same rocket, same flight, the market notices the price. The accountants notice the margin. And that margin is the first of our 4 numbers. Because the whole business runs on one equation: cost per kilogram times payload mass times flight rate times repeat contracts. Lower the cost, that's number 1. Now watch what the other 3 do. Number 2 is mass, and number 3 is cadence. And cadence is where it stops being a rocket company and becomes a printing press. A single rocket you fly once a year is a museum piece. A rocket you fly 100+ times a year prints money. SpaceX flew around 170 missions in 2025, and boosters now routinely fly 30 or more times each. Every extra flight spreads the fixed cost of the factory, the pad, and the engineers across one more paying customer. The rocket isn't the asset, the flight rate is the asset. Okay, so that's the math. Now, the architecture. You've probably seen a Falcon 9 launch. Notice what SpaceX is actually optimizing for? It isn't raw power. Plenty of rockets have more thrust. It's turnaround. Everything about the vehicle is engineered to come back and fly again, fast. The landing legs, the grid fins, the soot-stained boosters they proudly refuse to repaint. The industry has a term for this obsession: rapid reusability. The goal isn't to launch once perfectly. The goal is to launch constantly. Because every day a booster sits in a hangar is a day it isn't earning. That's number 3, built into the metal. And then there's number 4, repeat contracts, hiding in plain sight. SpaceX doesn't just sell launches to other people. It launches its own satellites. Starlink rides SpaceX rockets to orbit at internal cost, building a subscription internet business on top of the cheapest launch capacity on Earth. The rocket company feeds the satellite company, which pays the rocket company, which lowers the cost for the next launch. It's a flywheel, and everyone outside it is paying retail to spin it. But the biggest repeat customer of all is the one nobody can compete for: the government. The way a casino's whales generate a quarter of the revenue, a handful of government contracts underwrite this entire industry. NASA and the Pentagon don't shop on price alone. They pay a premium for reliability, for security clearances, for launching a $2 billion spy satellite that absolutely cannot fail. A commercial customer haggles over a few million. A national security payload comes with a contract worth hundreds of millions, and a customer who will fly a rocket from anywhere on their schedule and pay a premium for the privilege. That's why the real money in rockets was never really the rocket. It was becoming the trusted delivery service for the one customer who prints money and cannot afford to lose the package. So there's the whole model in one line: cost per kilogram times mass times flight rate times repeat contracts. 4 numbers. Every single thing SpaceX builds exists to move one of them. So with all this, the cheapest launches in history, guaranteed government demand, a satellite business riding for free, why does almost everyone else in this industry go bankrupt? The short answer is everything else. Out of every dollar of, quote, cheap launch, most of it is gone before you see a profit. A rocket company is a factory, a launch site, a small army of the most expensive engineers on Earth, and a fixed cost that eats you alive whether or not you fly. About a third disappears into payroll. Another huge chunk goes into the pad and ground infrastructure, which cost a fortune and earn nothing while empty. Then there's the stuff most people never think about, insurance, because a rocket that fails takes a customer's satellite with it. Range costs, tracking, propellant, refurbishment, and the brutal one, every failure isn't just a lost rocket, it's a grounded fleet, a federal investigation, and customers who quietly walk to your competitor while you're stuck on the ground. The cost per kilogram gives you a beautiful top line. Everything below it is a fistfight. And that fistfight is where nearly every rocket company dies, and it has a small set of repeat patterns. Two mistakes show up over and over, and almost every famous space bankruptcy of the last few years boils down to one of them. Mistake 1. A clever rocket, but no customers. Virgin Orbit, founded by Richard Branson in 2017, launched satellites by dropping a rocket from a modified Boeing 747, a genuinely clever idea. It went public in 2021, but raised only $228 million, less than half the $483 million it projected. The technology mostly worked. The market didn't. As one analyst put it, Virgin Orbit didn't have a viable business. There were simply too few customers. One failed UK launch in January 2023, and within weeks, 85% of the staff, around 675 people, were gone. By April, it was bankrupt. Don't fall in love with a clever rocket. Fall in love with a customer who'll pay for it 100 times. Mistake 2. Chasing scale before you've nailed reliability. Astrospace made Orbit, but its rocket went 2 for 7 on launches, including 2 very public failures. A company once valued at over $2.1 billion collapsed to 50 cents a share. In rockets, usually works is the same as doesn't work, because the one time it fails with someone's irreplaceable payload on top. Consistency isn't a feature, it's the entire product. Step back for a second. The economics here are paradoxical. A rocket company holds one of the most valuable capabilities in the modern world, access to orbit, the gateway to a trillion-dollar economy. And yet these companies go bankrupt at rates that would embarrass a restaurant. Why? Because the cheap launch math only works at scale and over time. The factory only pays off if you fly constantly. The reusability only pays off after dozens of flights. Everything outside the rocket has to also be perfect. Your funding, your reliability, your customers, your timing. The engineering can be flawless. Everything you build on top of it usually isn't. Time to answer the actual question. How much do you make if you do this right? 2 scenarios. Scenario 1. The broker. You buy launches on someone else's rocket and resell the capacity. Low capital, thin margins, and you live or die on the price the big players set above you. Recession-resistant, unglamorous, and forever at the mercy of a rocket you don't control. Scenario 2. You own the rocket. Here's the fun fact most people miss. On a $74 million launch, the internal cost is around $15 million, meaning the launch line alone carries margins the rest of aerospace can only dream of. But the launch was never the real business. It's the loss leader that unlocks the satellites, the government contracts,
and the internet subscribers riding on top. A modern rocket company is barely a rocket company. It's a logistics empire that uses launch as the on-ramp. And if you survive long enough, you become something specific. SpaceX started as a company that couldn't get a single rocket to orbit. Its first 3 launches failed, and Musk has said the 4th was the last one he could afford. Today, it's the most valuable private company on Earth, launching more mass to orbit than the rest of the planet combined. So if you do decide to buy a Falcon 9, just remember the most important rule of this business. The rocket always comes back down. Just make sure you're the one holding the contract when it does. And speaking of things that come back around, that's what the subscribe button is for. It's free, it's reusable, and unlike a Falcon 9, hitting it won't cost you $74 million. Land it before you leave. Subscribing costs less than a rocket and lands every time. Hit it. I've got a landing pad and everything.